Hello, everybody. It's Dr. Michael Hirsch, your host for this session of Stay Connected with the Worcester Senior Center. I'm the medical director for the Division of Public Health in the city of Worcester. And this is our November edition of our show. And so there's a lot to talk about, both in the public health realm and in just cultural things going on for the month of November. It's really one of my favorite months, even though it's a little gray and it gets a little cold and we may have a little touch of snow already, and some people aren't ready for the snow. It's the month for Thanksgiving, and I'll talk more about Thanksgiving at the end of the session here. But Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday for many reasons. And the most favorite reason is that it doesn't involve presents. It doesn't involve the pressure of, having to decorate necessarily, Christmas trees and Hanukkah bushes or whatever. It's just getting together with your loved ones and being together and eating a good meal, hopefully. And if you're fortunate enough, maybe you can watch a football game or play a little backyard sports, or if you have a child in high school sports, they might have a big game that day. So Thanksgiving is just a really great time. And as I said, I'll return to that at the end. So what about November? Well, the NOV in November, Novi was the Latin word for ninth. And this was supposed to be in the Julian calendar, the old calendar, the 9th month. But it became the 11th month when Pope Gregory got a hold of it. And it's a full month, essentially, of fall. But it's a little past the leaf peeping time. Things get a little gray and cloudy. The nights get shorter. I mean, the nights get longer, but the daylight gets shorter, and we do change the clocks on the first Sunday in November, Saturday into Sunday. We lose an hour, so it's going to be a great month, though, I think, because there's just so many great things to do in this area of the country. Pumpkin patches are still out, and you will probably have some opportunities to get together with your friends. As far as the month goes, the flower is the chrysanthemum, and you'll see those all over the place in window boxes and on porches and on stoops. Chrysanthemums are beautiful. And then you'll also celebrate, potentially, if you get engaged or you happen to be born this month. Your birthstone is the topaz, which is a lovely kind of amber color, yellow. They're quite exquisite. As far as the month itself, as far as celebrating or commemorating different issues, causes, it's very ripe. I can give you the list. It's like COPD, pulmonary disease, mostly caused by smoking, but it can be caused also with industrial inhalation. The miners used to get it from black lung disease and things like that. Diabetes month is this month. Premature birth is also commemorated on this month, and there are some very important things that we try to advise young moms that they can prevent prematurity. Prematurity adds quite a bit of risk to both the mother and the child. So doing things like taking prenatal vitamins, seeing a qualified obstetrician or a family medicine doctor who does obstetrics, or now we have also the options of doulas that are kind of pregnancy coaches. All of those things have been shown to reduce the amount of prematurity that's out there. This is also a month that tries to make people aware of impaired driving. That used to be almost always alcohol as the source of the impairment. But nowadays, in many states, marijuana has overtaken that. And it's a real problem for law enforcement. It's a problem for trauma surgeons back at our trauma center because it's not as detectable, and people also taking marijuana don't really necessarily feel that they're impaired. Buzzed driving is just as much of an impairment as being over the alcohol limit of 0.8. And we don't have an easy test when you get stopped for erratic driving by our police to test for marijuana. The marijuana tests we have are not necessarily that accurate because marijuana stays in your system for like 6 weeks. So it doesn't prove that if you did have a positive test for marijuana that you just took some marijuana that day and that's why you were driving impaired. So it becomes a real legal battle whether the person's going to be prosecuted or not for this erratic driving that they were stopped for. So suffice it to say, if you're buzzed, if you're drunk, there are a lot of things that we can do now to help you get home safely. Uber and Lyft certainly are the ways to go. Having a designated driver with you who's not partaking of any substances is a great way to do it. We've kind of now, thanks to the efforts of Mothers Against Drunk Driving and Students Against Drunk Driving, educated a lot of the bars and pubs that the bartender should not continue to serve people that look major league impaired. And if they are major league impaired, they can actually call for a taxi cab, which they will get reimbursed for. So this is a very important part of trauma work that I do. It's the prevention part. For every dollar we spend on prevention of any injury, we save at least $20 on the treatment side. It's a very, very important piece, and that's why on November 18th is National Injury Prevention Day. And at UMass, what we have done in the past is we've helped to light up the Burns Bridge that crosses Lake Quinsigamond over to Shrewsbury green, which is the international color for injury prevention. And we've had some kind of event, usually either a cyber event like on social media or some other event. Mayor Petty's been very supportive of this, and we'll be doing some event like that. I think maybe not on the 18th, which is a Tuesday. I think we're going to do something on Saturday, the 15th, just because of the timing. So what else is noticed on this month? The first Thursday of this month is recognized as Cyberbullying Prevention Day. Cyberbullying has become a big deal. If you have kids or grandkids that are on their phones a lot and you notice that they have changed their mood or don't want to go to school or don't want to go to, a camp or even an athletic activity that they used to love, you might have a suspicion that something has happened in the media. And, look, I'm a grandfather now. I have 2 wonderful kids, and I have 3 grandkids with 1 on the way. I worked my whole life with pediatric kids who are unfortunately ill or injured. But I know my way around kids. And what I'm saying is, as much as I love them, they can be cruel to one another. And usually they learn that cruelty from us adults. But check for that. Check for those mood changes. And if you do notice that and you know that your kid has been on a laptop or on a phone or, just not completely normal in what their activity level has been, think about cyberbullying. I'm glad they recognize that as an important date. Another very important date is the Great American Smokeout. That's the third Thursday of every November, And what happens on that day is we at the Department of Public Health and also the American Cancer Society and several other organizations, American Heart Association, put on programs either online or locally. You can look these up at www.worcesterma.gov to encourage people to quit smoking. Even if it's just for that day to give it a try, and you may be surprised to hear many of the people that try just for a day, they try another day, and sooner or later they get free of the tyranny of smoking. Why do I say tyranny? Well, number one, these cigarettes are packed with nicotine, which is very, very addictive. Besides getting you hooked, nicotine also changes the tone of your blood vessels, which is one of the reasons why smoking is such a risk for heart disease. The tar and the smoke of smoking gets your lungs into trouble. You're inhaling that. It's a very toxic mixture. And over time, it's been shown since really 1957, but the Surgeon General first came out with the warning about it in '64, that smoking and cancer are linked. And they are truly linked. I'll talk a little bit about some other crazy medical theories that came out this month that are not so linked. But this one has stood the test of time. It's been 60 years that we know smoking and cancer are linked. And they knew that even before, because I'm a big old movie buff. I watch a lot of World War II movies. The GIs and Marines and sailors that went off to fight the war for us, they were all given tons of cigarettes. It was great marketing for Camel and Lucky Strikes and some of the brands that you don't hear about too much anymore today to get these young GIs hooked. And on several of these movies, they'll say to one of their buddies, "Hey, you got any more cancer sticks?" Well, okay. It wasn't such a well-kept secret then, right? So on the smokeout day, there are aids that you can acquire, nicotine patches that might satisfy your need to smoke, and just other good information on our website about how to go about quitting. When you quit, within about a week, you're going to start seeing improvement in your cardiovascular system. The tension in your blood vessels will relax once you're off nicotine, even for like 48 to 72 hours. The damage to your lungs, that's a little harder to say because they measure your damage by how many packs a day you had over how many years. They call that pack years. So if you've been smoking a long time, you probably have sustained already some damage. Not necessarily that has turned into cancer, but it won't reverse right away. You still might have obstructive pulmonary disease, which is why November and Smoke Out with the COPD Awareness Month all kind of makes sense. So I would urge you, take advantage if you are still a smoker. How many people are smokers? Well, that number has fortunately gone down, but in the central Massachusetts area, it's still close to 30% of the people smoke. If you go east to the Boston area, that number goes down to like 18, 19%. And in Western Mass, it's also about 25 to 30%. So we've made tremendous strides, because when the Surgeon General came out with that warning, the population, probably 70%, did smoke at the time. So lots of different techniques used to make smoking less cool. Don't portray it so much in movies and in TV, and just in general make the public aware of how dangerous smoking is. Every month we have a Board of Health meeting for the city of Worcester, and every month we're out there trying to explain to the public that are listening and to the tobacco vendor who has been brought in because they violated one of our tobacco ordinances, that as much as we want to keep those convenience stores that sell tobacco products open, because they are mostly family-owned, mom and pop kind of shops, we don't want to discourage business in Worcester, but every single person in that store, if there's smoking going on, is at risk. And giving young kids illegally under the age of 21 smoking products gets them hooked at an early age, and the earlier you get hooked, the harder it is for you to stop. So, yeah, the Great American Smokeout, very important date. So, before I segue into some public health stuff, very important date in November is November 11th. So if you know your history, at 11:11 a.m. on the 11th month of the year, on 1918, the First World War, which was at the time called the Great War, or the War to End All Wars, the armistice that stopped hostilities was signed. And forevermore, November 11th was designated as Veterans Day. That war kind of has lost a lot of its sheen. Not many survivors, if any, are left from that period of time. And of course, World War II kind of eclipsed it in damage and in disaster and you know, the fact that it ushered in the era of nuclear arms. But that war was a really hellscape war. Europe fought from 1914 to 1918 without us, and then we joined the war effort in 1917. So we only had about a year and a half of the fighting before the armistice was declared. But it was the presence of our young, fresh troops that helped to win that war. So Veterans Day is different than Memorial Day. A lot of people kind of say, oh, they're equivalent. Didn't we just celebrate veterans on Memorial Day? Memorial Day is specifically for veterans and their families, veterans who have paid the ultimate price, the ultimate sacrifice, and were killed in battle. The Veterans Day celebrates all the veterans that served, and we have to salute them for their service, and we really are so fortunate that in our country, where we've made the crossover from a draft to an all-volunteer army, that we haven't missed a beat. We have an outstanding military force. I do get a little nervous about changing our Department of Defense name into the Department of War. That's what it was until after World War II. We're not a warlike people. And I am a little concerned that some of the people who kind of posture about we need warriors and we need, you know, ultimate fighting machines to be in our armed forces, you know, it was the grocery boy, it was the pharmacist, it was the factory worker that filled up the ranks when we had our greatest challenge in World War II. And they came from all walks of life, all colors and creeds, all religions, and they did just fine. We don't necessarily need a warrior class. So I would take issue with that characterization. And I think that most veterans, when I've talked to them recently, have been somewhat appalled by some of the shenanigans that have been going on out of the Pentagon. So now I'll segue over to somewhat depressing stuff with public health, because unfortunately we're continuing to lose ground because of the strength of Donald J. Trump and his Health and Human Services Secretary, Robert Kennedy, at getting disinformation out. So what's happened since last I talked to you in October? Well, Mr. Kennedy made an association between circumcision, which about 80% of males in the United States undergo, and autism. There is absolutely no scientific basis for that. As a matter of fact, when you question him, he says, oh, we're looking for the scientific basis for that. But his theory is that little kids that get circumcisions, you have pain, their mommies give them Tylenol, and Tylenol causes autism. He's already been down this road, and we talked about it last month, that he was trying to discourage pregnant women, and the president jumped right in on this, from taking Tylenol during pregnancy because they supposedly had an association with having autistic kids. All of these pronouncements certainly are hurting the Tylenol Corporation, but more importantly, if you discourage kids from having circumcisions, parents make that decision with their pediatrician or with their obstetrician, do they want one or not, you may revisit the days when we had a much, much higher rate of venereal disease and penile cancer. So forcing a whole swath of young parents not to get their kids circumcised will have health consequences down the road. And on very little scientific basis that autism and Tylenol are linked. As far as young pregnant moms, you can't give them the standard kind of painkillers that maybe our age, meaning senior age folk, can take. Aleve and ibuprofen, naproxen, all of these medications can promote bleeding. And that's something that a pregnant mom doesn't need to have because they're very prone to bleeding. They have a placenta that is feeding the blood flow to the baby that's very, very rich in blood. And they have 1.5 times the blood volume of a non-pregnant mom the same age. So the last thing they need is something that will promote bleeding. So they don't have any other alternative than taking Tylenol. Tylenol has been taken for decades safely by pregnant moms. But in the world of Robert F. Kennedy, he thinks there's an association with febrile seizures and Tylenol taking. And if you have a febrile seizure, take Tylenol. Did that cause your autism? All this has done is roiled up mothers of autistic kids and autistic kids themselves to say, are we so awful that nobody would ever want an autistic kid? It's just been very, very poorly messaged, and I think it's gotten everybody very, very unfairly alarmed. So the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American College of Obstetrical Doctors, the American Medical Association, everyone has come out against those associations that Robert F. Kennedy has been pushing. So, there's some strange things coming out of the CDC. And at the same time, the CDC has always been the home of some outstanding experts in tracking down the origins of an outbreak, experts at describing on a weekly basis what were the causes of what we call morbidity or illness or mortality, death in the United States. That's their weekly report is the MMWR, Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. Towards the end of October, 1,300 people involved with outbreak investigations, epidemic prevention, and creating the MMWR were fired on a Friday night. By Saturday, they realized that they had made a mistake, and they rehired about half of them back. This is not the way to run the CDC. And there's a lot of resentment from the people that were fired, certainly. But even if you stayed, to think that you were so superfluous and so non-consequential an employee that you could just get zapped in a minute doesn't make you feel very welcome or rewarded or secure. And this is unfortunately why we can't really trust what's coming out of HHS in Washington or CDC in Atlanta. Fortunately, we have a very progressive governor and a great commissioner of the Department of Public Health for the state of Massachusetts, Robbie Goldstein and Maura Healey. They are not allowing a lot of the pronouncements from the CDC to take root here in Massachusetts. And not just in Massachusetts, they formed a consortium of 6 different states, Maine, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, and Pennsylvania are all in a consortium, and they're making up their own, they're not making them up, they're following science-guided rules for recommendations about all things vaccinations and other preventive medical maneuvers. So I think we're going to have plenty of vaccine to go around. We're still going to be recommending that people over the age of 65 all get COVID vaccine, for example. CDC says, no, you can have a discussion with your primary care physician and decide whether you want it or not. Well, that's true. You can always tell your primary care physician that you don't want it, but you shouldn't be afraid of it. These mRNA vaccines have saved millions of lives, and it's going to be the way of the world. This is the newest technology that's going to be applied to many other diseases. If we ever have, God forbid, an outbreak of bird flu, you're going to see an mRNA viral vaccine will come out and will hopefully save us. So we are recommending that anyone who wants a vaccine should get it, that 65 and over definitely should get it. And that's not a vaccine mandate. And that you shouldn't feel worried about giving it to any child over the age of 6 months, or a pregnant woman should not worry about getting it. And that's the wide consensus of many vaccine experts and medical associations in those specialties. Flu vaccine administration has started up in all over the country, but the rate of flu vaccination is way down. We used to have it somewhere in the range of 40%, maybe 45%. It's down in the 20s. And I am worried that if we have an aggressive flu version this year, that we're going to see a big uptick in flu. It may not be severe. I think right now we're coming out of a COVID spurt that happened in late September, early October, the numbers have now come down. Maybe now that it's getting colder in November, we're going inside more, we might see it rise up again. But we didn't see a huge crush in the hospitals for bed space in the ICU or in the ER. A lot of people tested positive for COVID in the ER that didn't even know they had COVID. So it's potentially a milder strain that's out there, but in certain patients, it's going to make you sick. In certain patients, and we think about 20 million of them are out there, you might get long COVID symptoms from it, which range from everything from muscle weakness to GI upset to chronic fatigue, chronic shortness of breath, heart problems. So why get it if you don't have to? If you've never been vaccinated, I would definitely tell you to get a vaccination. If you have been vaccinated, consider getting a booster, particularly if you haven't gotten one in a couple of years. As far as the other vaccinations, yes, the HHS has been monkeying with the different types of childhood vaccinations that pediatricians have been giving for a long time. For some reason, they've decided that having a quadruple vaccination of measles, mumps, rubella, which is German measles, and chickenpox, varicella, was too much. So they want to separate it into MMR and then get a separate V. Now, as it is, children will get as many as 30 different vaccines over the first 5 years of their lives. And this separation will set some of them off so that they'll get exposed to chickenpox before they get their vaccine. Or it may make people say, you know, I got the MMR, I'm not getting the V. And the varicella one is an important one because if you can avoid getting it, it's not just that you're avoiding getting chickenpox as a kid, and some of those chickenpox cases can be serious, but you can also know that varicella is the one that pops up years later, can be dormant, and you get what's called the shingles. So, you know, what was that old expression? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. These are noodling around with well-established regimens that have worked for many, many years. And there's never been a study that has shown that any of these vaccinations we've talked about is a clear cause of autism. And until there is, you're not going to convince doctors and scientists to not recommend them. But he's able, with the power of social media, the power of the press conferences that he has with the president, to instill doubt and fear, and those kind of misapprehensions are going to cost us down the line. So I would urge you, do what your primary care physician says. They know the score, whether it's an adult, if you're getting your vaccinations, or your child's pediatrician or family doc. They know the score. And if you're pregnant, your obstetrician knows the score. And they will follow the correct rules. And Maura Healey and Robbie Goldstein have given physicians and pharmacies the approval and the strength to continue to recommend what they think is right as per the best practices of their medical associations and pharmaceutical associations. There are 16 states in the South where you can't get a COVID vaccine if you go to a CVS down there. But in the North, we're safe. So listen to reason, follow the science. We have a lot of literature about this, again, on that www.worcesterma.gov site. And if you have questions, you can always drop email to our health email or leave a call into our health line. All the information about that's at that site. So it is a tough time in public health, and particularly because there are other challenges that are being ignored. So I think maybe a couple of weeks ago, maybe a couple of Board of Health meetings ago, there were a lot of inquiries going on about some publicity coming out about an entity called the screw worm. The screw worm is part of the life cycle of a type of bot fly. And this bot fly mostly inhabits South America, Central America, and some in Mexico. Since the 1950s, it's been recognized that the way this fly's life cycle is, it lays eggs in the flesh, mostly of cattle, but also can be deer. And in those eggs is a worm that comes out the next day after the eggs are laid called the screw worm. Now, the screw worm will eat flesh all around it. As a matter of fact, there was a medicinal use to the screw worm in the days, in the early 1900s, where if you had a macerated wound, a wound that wasn't healing well and had a lot of dead flesh on it, you could actually put these little screw worms on that area and they would eat the bad tissue. The problem with the screw worm, unlike maggots, which know when to stop, they eat the dead stuff but not the live stuff, the screw worm keeps eating your live stuff. So if you happen to get a slab of beef that has this and you eat it and you don't cook it well, the screw worm can come out in your belly and eat its way through your intestines. And if you're working with cattle, you can also get the screw worm to jump into your wounds if you happen to have any wounds, and can cause infection and also can cause an allergic reaction, which will make you unable to eat red meat. So I was very fascinated when this story came out about 2 months ago, because in the 50s, this brilliant group of entomologists, those are scientists that specialize in insects, came up with a brilliant way of stopping this entity from multiplying and coming up into the United States. They created with genetic manipulation, a group of sterile male flies. And when the sterile male flies mated with these bot flies, the eggs weren't produced. And that stemmed the tide of the first wave of the bot fly from coming up from South America to our United States. Now, it sounds fantastic. I mean, they have a whole group of people at the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, that track this, and they have been able to keep this disease, this screwworm problem, out of America for 50 years. Now, what happened with DOGE and what happened with a lot of the newer budget cuts that are coming down the pike, the staff that's in charge of that stuff is getting canned. So it is harder to be 100% certain about beef, and southern beef distributors are not accepting beef from a lot of South American countries. This has reduced the supply of beef, and beef prices are going up. So this all has this kind of a ripple effect. It affects a lot of different people. And I'm hoping, I spoke to a wonderful professor from the Cummings Veterinary School in Grafton. It's one of our local public health partners, Dr. Isabel Loge, and she was concerned. I would say her level of concern was moderate. It's not like hair on fire, don't eat beef, but it's definitely something where, if you were a hunter, you got to be careful. Some of the deer in Florida have been found to have these botfly infestations. And you also should be aware that in general, you should get your beef from a reliable source, and it should have that nice USDA inspected stamp on it. Don't buy it off a truck or wherever. This is the kind of information that we want to get out. So I think that's really all I wanted to talk about as far as public health challenges. So I wanted to finish up really with a little more about Thanksgiving, because most of you know this story. This supposedly, this holiday arose because the pilgrims who had come here from England for religious freedom gradually made peace with the indigenous people, and the indigenous people figured out ways of teaching them how to grow corn and how to trap certain animals, and they had a collaborative relationship, and they celebrated it with a big meal where they apparently had turkey, and that's the first Thanksgiving. It wasn't until actually the 1900s that the fourth Thursday of every November was designated as Thanksgiving. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a great holiday because it's a low pressure holiday. Well, it might be pressure if you're not completely in love with your relatives. I'm not going there. But I find that when we get together as a family, it's a wonderful event, right? And that whole weekend now has become like a crazy long holiday. You got you have Thanksgiving on Thursday, then you have Black Friday, which is a shopper's paradise, getting all your stuff for Christmas. The day after Thanksgiving is also known as Indigenous Peoples Day. And so if you wanted to take a moment to kind of recognize the fact that the indigenous folk of the United States have kind of had a raw deal in many ways, but they're still around, they're still proud. We still have a very active group of Nipmuc and Wampanoag Indians here in the New England region. So it's not just Black Friday. And then Saturday is supposed to be Small Business Saturday of that weekend, where instead of going to the big box stores and to chains, or you go into the littler shops in your town or on your street, and try to support local businesses so they can enjoy a nicer holiday season too. And then Monday after Thanksgiving is Cyber Monday. And that's where all the people are too lazy to go to Black Friday, get their deals online. And, the various outlets are only too happy to accept your online money to get you the presents or whatever items that you need to get ready for the Christmas holiday, which we'll be talking about next month. So the only thing I wanted to say about all of this, it's kind of, if you remember the Peanuts movie about A Charlie Brown Christmas, how he felt everything was over-commercialized. I think it's been a wonderful tradition in my family that we go around the table to everybody that comes to our house, or if we go to someone's house in our family, and we say, what are you thankful for? What are you thankful for, either today or over the last year? Because I think you have to take a moment to recognize what a gift it is to be alive, what a gift it is to be able to be with family, to also understand that there are many people who can't be, whether it's the homeless people that we see everywhere in Worcester, whether it's our soldiers on the front lines all over the world who can't be home with their families, or just people that don't have a family and are alone. Check in on those people. Think about that as well as a effort. One of the other dates I didn't talk about earlier in November, and November 15th is International Mitzvah Day. Many of you have heard of the word bar or bas mitzvah. Well, mitzvah is the Hebrew word for blessing. So that's a day that you're supposed to do a good deed for somebody. And I think it's a great concept. But you don't have to do it on the 15th of November. You could do it on that big Thanksgiving weekend where your family's gathering. Figure out something nice that you can do. So I think unless you have some degree of awareness that you're supposed to give thanks on Thanksgiving for your many blessings, it can't just be eat the turkey, watch the football game, turn on a tube for some video that you like, go shopping the next day, and then again on Monday. That's the commercialism that Charlie Brown was trying to warn us against. And I'm not saying you guys do that. I don't think you do. I've found Worcester to be an incredibly warm and giving city. That's why I'm wearing this particular hat today. This is the hat that was created by the United Way right after the beginning of the pandemic. It means Worcester together. And Worcester did pull together during the pandemic. And that's something I will always be thankful for. And I'm also thankful that you're nice enough to watch these shows. So with your blessing, I wish you a wonderful month of November. I'm going to sign off and see you in December. Be well. Take it easy.